what's so exciting about this time is that we all now get to achieve previously unimaginable outcomes that effectively are $20 a month for the geniuses that work and live inside of Google Deep Research, which are agents. And the agents get smarter every single time anyone, myself and others, yourself, interact with them because it's learning loops.
AI isn't the future, it's now. And whether you're in HR, sales, operations, or leadership, the choices you make today will determine whether you thrive or get left behind.
Today's guest is Alec Coughlin, a leading voice at the intersection of deep tech, creativity, and business. He is the creator and host of the podcast AI with Alec and has a massive passion for helping humans and machines work better together. Alec, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Awesome to be here.
Oh my gosh. Your mantra is humans and machines, not humans versus machines. So I would love for you to just dive in because I feel like that embodies our podcast a bit. So dive in. How did you come up with that? And what really illustrates that mindset in action?
It's a great question. Thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here. I think, generally speaking, the light bulb went on for me in 2016 when I saw robotic process automation, RPA, which is now pretty straightforward, right? But if you take a step back and you think about the implications of effectively enabling an MRI of a business, right? So understanding all the different component parts of process in the value chain of insert name of business, that can be really exciting, or it can be a little bit terrifying for management consultants, for example. And so as I went down my, kind of self-education, learning journey, however you want to describe it, as I learned more and more and got closer and closer to, the rails and the technology, I would constantly see this struggle between those that viewed it as something very scary and those that view it as something very opportunistic and exciting. And so I've always tried my best to document my learning journey and, as an operator, led build and public model across Twitter and LinkedIn and yada, yada, to hopefully help more people move towards, hey, this is really awesome and exciting. It's gonna be hard and complex, but it's very exciting, as opposed to the sky's falling, it's terrifying, and the world's gonna end. And that's unfortunately, that's the struggle that I think a lot of folks have. And that's why I was so in part excited about this podcast, because I imagine when you come to voice and victim, that tends to lead right into that type of a way of thinking about it. So I'm very honored to be here and excited to talk to you guys about this stuff.
Well, let's take a little bit of a step back and tell me more about who you are, how you really got involved in AI, and what you are using it for today.
So the short version of how I got involved is I was hunting in the backyard of Razorfish, going after Goldman Sachs, and that got Razorfish's attention, and one thing led to another. And I was so fortunate to be recruited to join Razorfish, which eventually became Publicis Sapient. So we went from 2,300 to 23,000 people by combining, 5 or 6 different entities within the world of creative and technology and digital business transformation. And so long story short, I always joke and shout out to Igor, I didn't choose AI, it chose me, because once the lightning bolt struck, like I mentioned with robotic process automation, it was over. And so, long story short, that's how it all kind of started for me. And then you just become, I think the term that I tend to use is in the name of this studio, actually, curiosity. I'm infinitely curious about this space. And so everything I do, whether it's advising, whether it's investing, whether it's building, I'm just trying to just stay as close as I can to the edge of it, but then pull it back into reality of like, okay, great. So what can we do right now with this and make a better decision, as opposed to maybe thinking about what's 6, 12, 18 months away? Because at this point, I don't think that anybody can reasonably suggest that they know what's going to happen 12 plus months out right now. Because this stuff, we're in the exponential stage. That doesn't,
It's changing way too rapidly. But that actually leads me to a next question, which is, you often say that there's no AI enterprise playbook. And I think that that's what a lot of people want. We want the step-by-step play, especially us anxious people, to figure it out. So what is the biggest misconception that you see about AI in business today, and how do you help people move past that?
That's a fantastic question. I was involved with a chief strategy officer roundtable, enterprise, big companies. last week. And I think the biggest challenge, if I could put, my finger on one thing to address, more leaders within these companies of any size need to have that magical moment, right? More leaders need to experience the technology themselves in their day-to-day workflow. Like I was asking before, you ChatGPT, you Perplexity, Claude, what have you. And if you follow the Ethan Mollick 10-hour rule, which if anybody listening isn't aware of Ethan Mollick, especially in the context of voice and victim, this is the best professor, the best thinker and leader in academia around all things AI. But you really want to have leaders get their hands in the dirt, experience it, use it in their actual workflows, create value, and then the unlock happens. And then once that starts to happen, it becomes a whole lot easier for execution frameworks to be developed versus folks, maybe sitting in the C-suite office and quote unquote telling people what to do with this stuff. Cause they don't, I don't think they, there's a reason 1% to 4% of enterprises today are considered AI mature per McKinsey, and I think it's BCG. It's because the leaders are struggling to acknowledge and say the quiet part out loud, which is we don't know what's going on and we need to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, it comes up quite a bit. I mean, you reference Razorfish and Sapient. I remember competing back in the day when it was Sapient Nitro and all of that
For
came
sure.
together. And so I've always kind of built my career too on a similar kind of like framework basis. And one of the things Eric and we were talking to a room full of CEOs last week, and you could tell there was a lot of folks that were very skeptical and anxious, and they would ask all of these kind of gotcha type questions that if you understood the technical side of how this thing's work, you understand why it's doing or responding the way it's doing. And it becomes very challenging. We're seeing that quite a bit, right? One of the comments I made last week to a different group was your AI council can't be comprised of solely folks that don't know anything about AI, right? Because what you're going to end up doing is nothing.
Smart. This guy's smart.
Right. But all these folks, a lot of these organizations, their AI council is solely comprised of folks that have only heard about it, or they're, it's very tangential to their job. I was in data, so of course I'm the AI person. I was in analytics, so I'm the AI person. I was in IT, right? And so you got to get a broader, cross section. The thing that we consistently say to folks, this is the first technology in our generation that affects every single employee, right? It's not just the IT department. It's not just marketing, right? So we talk about, even in our intro, we talk about whether you're in HR, operations, sales, or marketing, right? We're really trying to impact everyone. But to your point, and we talked a little bit off camera about this, right? Leadership has to get involved. We're reaching a point very quickly here where it's no longer carrot, it's going to be stick. And the stick is, sink or swim, live or die, AI. So what's your take on that?
So becoming an AI first company, shout out Toby, who kicked this thing off. And then you got Mika Kaufman, who we spoke about, the founder and CEO of Fiverr, who's technical, right? Which I think also lends into a little bit of his directness. But I do think that to the point of looking for a memorandum is one thing, but an execution playbook is another thing. I think it's a little bit challenging for all sorts of different reasons, because one of the things I mentioned, Benedict Evans, who is unbelievable. He was interviewed by Matt Turk recently, and Benedict Evans was talking about this idea of, for example, if you use some of these tools outside of your domain of expertise, you might not know when it's lightweight hallucinating and or, big time hallucinating. And so I think one of the ways to think about maybe developing a playbook or an execution framework is to enable people by discipline to focus on their domain of expertise. I'm talking like circle of competence stuff. And then just introduce, one of the existing pre-built tools, whether it be a ChatGPT, a Perplexity, a Google Deep Research, whatever it might be, and say, hey, we're going to do a 30-day sprint associated with a very important business outcome tied to a series of understood workflows. And we're going to create a bunch of value because we're going to do a before versus after, and then we're going to build on that. Because everybody's going to get 5 to 10 times the firepower that they had, in 2022. It's just simply a matter of stepping into it. And that's the run at it, our man, Bill Gurley, right? So run at the technology, do not run away from it. It's just not going to work out for you. I can guarantee, that's the only thing I can guarantee about the future. If you run away from it,
The tsunami, man. You can't outrun the tsunami.
No.
You
and you can't surf it. Yeah.
Right, right. And you described, right, basically a similar kind of approach that we've taken here, even at Walk West, on how we're transforming organizations. Like call it our kind of our 4-course meal or our 4 modules, right? We start with the general primer at the top, then we take a horizontal view of and say, all right, whether it's Office of CMO, Office of COO, whatever, right? Then we take a role specific view, right? To your point, like it's that some of the folks around us will say, I can't remember what you said, but they say a zone of genius, right? Whatever your domain is within that role, but then make it personal, right? So then bring it down to that level. And what we say all the time is like, if you're going to do an AI adoption, if you're going to start to move your company, so you got to do 3 things. You got to make it personal, you got to make it fun, and you got to make it safe, right? I don't care about your business goals if you can't tell me and articulate how does this help me be more productive in my job. And the moment they do that, you call it an unlock. I say unlock a lot. Eric will say your aha moment, right? You have to get these folks to find their aha moment. I found my aha moment a couple years ago, right? And I started going down this path. Erica's found some aha moments, and now she's been using it a lot more than me some days, right? She's got like 9 digital twins doing different things, assistants that she's created. Right. And she's non-technical in her.
And I'm a solopreneur, non-technical, so I got to employ all these chatbots I can.
Yeah.
I do want to take a slight like side road because I want to talk a bit about hallucinations because I think this is a big fear. And in this group of CEOs that Greg and I were talking about, everyone has this expectation that because it's a robot, right, or a computer, that it should give me a perfect output. And we know this isn't true, right? I did something where I had it do a compare and contrast with one of my clients. Her business versus a business is very similar. And I know her business very well because she's one of my private clients and she's located here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And AI gave me this output that because she was headquartered in West Africa, that that was one of her differentiating key factors, and it went down this tangent. Well, I, of course, know that's a red flag, right? That is not. But where does it get these hallucinations from? Like, does it just
was
make
she actually in West Africa?
No,
like the company?
She is here in Raleigh, North Carolina, has never done global. So where did a hallucination this left field come from? And like, do we know the answer to that? I don't know.
So hallucinations within the context of marketing are big ideas. Right. So I think one of the things you want to think about is a hallucination in a financial market is an error that's going to be extremely costly versus a hallucination in a doctor's office could be the ultimate costly versus a hallucination in a creative exercise is fantastic, big ideas. And so to answer your question directly, it's a great question. Most of the time we quote unquote don't know. And it's good to say that, right? Because we don't understand what happens within the black box of the technology as it relates to the way they're constructed today. Now, there are ways to dramatically improve the accuracy and, keeping out of the technical weeds, promise, citations and different ways to have transparency into the thought process of the machine. So an example would be anybody that's listening, if you've used like Google Deep Research, you can actually toggle a switch and watch it think and watch it come, think through. That's where this is all headed, which is really cool. And I think that generally speaking, it's difficult sometimes to combat the media narrative around some of the stuff that is one potential instance of where this could go, right? One example of how, the negative effect of AI, for example. And if that thought process is internalized, then you start seeing things through a lens of it's just an unrealistic lens. You can't just AI it. AI is just systems. It's just really great systems that have LLMs and little brains and different things that connect the dots. But it's not a perfect system. It's a wonderful system, but it's a system that needs to be understood, harnessed, and safely deployed. And then we can kind of get to like, hey, let's crawl, walk, run, classic stuff. It's the pace of change is too much. We're not built to understand and experience exponential change and just be like, oh, this is all good, right? This is unique. This is once in a generation, I imagine.
To that point, right, there's a lot, when it comes to hallucination, one of the things I've seen too, to your point, I referenced to an audience last week about how many people in the room. It was like 40, 50 people. I said, how many of you use deep research in any of these? Only one person raised their hand. And I describe that all the time. It's like, it is radically different. I started using deep research when Google had it back in December. I was playing around with the 1.5 experimental version. I was like, this is amazing, right? When you start looking at the chain of reasoning and how it's thinking through these things. And, so the other part is what I see people conflate a hallucination with them not recognizing the context that they gave, right? And what I mean by that, I've had a couple people say this was hallucinating. I was like, okay, maybe. I said, what did you put in there, right? And then I asked it to cite where it got the information. And I was like, did you give this context to it? Yes. Like, you not understanding what you put into a machine does not mean that it's hallucinating. Right. You didn't right. But that's the point where people will start to weaponize them like, oh, this thing just made it up. Maybe, or maybe one of those documents that you loaded in there reference West Africa or something. I don't know this to be the case or not, but I've seen it happen, and I've seen it actually catch itself, right? When you ask the question. I was using GenSpark over the weekend to play around making some decks and some things like that. And they had a cool little feature on each slide where it says fact check. You just click the button, then it goes, and you can see it thinking, you can see where it's trying to cite it and this and that, right? But you have to do these things, right? To Erica's point, you can't just take it at first glance, but you also have to own some part of it. I think one of the comments I've heard recently when Erica and I have done these presentations is we hold the tech to a much higher standard than we hold the humans, right? So if the tech is wrong 5% of the time, we're like, oh no, we can't use this. But the humans are wrong 25% of the time. We're like, all right, well, that's pretty cool. Good job.
Well, I love what you just said, and just to jump in again, considering the all the different kind of understandings of this stuff. One of the things I think is really helpful too to think about, to your point about humans and machines. If you think of AI as just like an intern, right, or an entry level quote unquote employee, if it's in your domain of expertise, how would you onboard that person? To your point, right? How much leeway would you give them in the first 30 to 90 days to learn the fundamentals of the business and or certain things? Hey, it might take a little bit of time. And so I think if you think about AI and these systems more so as human beings that are super multidimensional and they have strengths, they have weaknesses, et cetera, you shape them, right? And then we're all going to become, managers and leaders of AI agents and AI systems as well as people. And that's where the humans and machines thing goes to the whole another level, which is coming.
That's fascinating. And as a chief people officer, what I find so interesting about that is we just assume everybody is going to read our minds, interns included. And we often say on this show that the truth will reveal you and AI will reveal you. And one of the things I know about myself is I hate getting into the details. So for me, when I go to AI and I ask it to put together something for me, I like to just say, great, it's done, right? But I never would have caught that West Africa mistake had I done that. So you do have to ensure that you're slowing down. But let's talk about this. Like, you're going to be a manager of chatbots. What do you envision the future of work is really going to look like if people are now machine leaders, I suppose?
So I think the simplest way to describe it is that if you think about Google Deep Research, right? I'm sure I'm oversimplifying this too much, but generally speaking, they've established an army of agents that are kind of purpose-built to understand how to function as a research arm for human beings that otherwise might ask other human beings, hey, can you allocate 20 hours to this? And the humans are like, cool, right? I'll come back to you in 2 business days, 3 business days, whatever it might be. But now you can just simply do what I just said and just say, hey, yada, yada, yada. It'll then come back to you and say, here's my game plan across my various agents, all my army of agents. Some are more specialized in this area versus others. And then I'll have at it. And like 3-4 minutes later, you have what effectively would have taken human beings 20 hours. So that's where some people would suggest that we're already at AGI in that regard, because that's previously unimaginable. Shout out Mika Kaufman, right? Going back to the idea of today's impossible tasks are tomorrow's hard tasks, like what I just mentioned there. So,
can you actually expand on that? Because I did hear you talking about that in the hallway, and I thought it was so fascinating how today's easy jobs, and I'll let you finish, today's easy jobs are going to go away, yes, and that means the hard jobs we have today
become easy. and today's impossible become hard. Yeah, pretty good, right? Mika gets all the credit for that. So if you internalize that, and again, for those that might view AI as quote unquote threatening, it's not. It's actually awesome, right? Because now, like I'm thinking in the back of my mind, because wheels are always turning, I'm thinking of the transcript to this conversation, and I'm thinking about how quickly I can just drop that into Claude and rip it apart, put it back together again, align it with what I just wrote about, with Benedict Evans and Matt Turk, yada yada, to make the excerpt and the vignette that we all share coming out of this much more relevant to my audience because they just read 12 hours previously, that type of thing. Now, if I were to try to do what I just said at that pace, first of all, I couldn't do it. Number one, even if I had all the humans in the world helping me. Number two, it's not economically feasible. That doesn't make sense from a finance perspective and a business perspective. And so therefore, what's so exciting about this time is that we all now get to achieve previously unimaginable outcomes that effectively are $20 a month for the geniuses that work and live inside of Google Deep Research, which are agents. And the agents get smarter every single time anyone, myself and others, yourself, interact with them because it's learning loops. And so this is where, going back to the previous conversation as well, you cannot run away from this. There is no way to run away from this from a business perspective specifically. And the reason for that is if you have 5 different businesses that are run, and targeting the exact same market, but one business is run by an AI native leader who's humble, confident, has a bunch of people around him or her that are the same way, they are going to absolutely eat your lunch very quickly. Like in the next 30 days, they're going to rip business from you because they can take price points down, they can expand margins, they can compress them, they can create new revenue streams in a blink of an eye that you cannot, because you're not running at it, you're running away from it. And that's how you get caught.
That's how, you get crushed, right? You get displaced, you get disrupted, all of the words, right? And we talk about that quite a bit. I always say to folks, it's like AI provides speed and optionality, right? And to your point, I use it all the time. And we were in a room recently talking to some folks, and they were like, well, one of the CEOs said, well, I'm concerned that folks are going to be dumber in the future. I said, because of AI, I said, I've learned more in the last 6 months than I've probably learned in the last 5 years. Right. I said, the idea that that's how people are viewing this just shows me, one, they don't fully understand yet. They don't understand the deep research part. They don't understand, I used it this past weekend on some different business ideas. I was trying to cross-reference some things and figure out, and it came back and gave me this beautiful report like 15 minutes later. Like my prompts are getting bigger and bigger and more detailed, but I don't understand structurally what I'm trying to do. Right. But I think part of the challenge one of the things we talk about from a human capabilities perspective, where the machine doesn't replace you, and I keep reciting this, is the 5 C's of humanity that we talk about, right? We talk about curiosity, creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. Those are the things that are innate in us as humans. And if we really start to just continue to explore what that means, right? Instead of focusing on, but I used to do this same task over and over again. Well, if you did the same task over and over again, that's likely a good fit for AI. And so we're on this journey, even with our marketing agency, right? More of a growth acceleration agency, I would say to folks, but going role by role. It doesn't matter if you're in finance or in HR, it doesn't matter. You can get 10 to 40% productivity gains out the gate. You can have your own aha moments, right? Your own unlocks. And that's where it's going to really start to transform your companies. But to your point, a lot of folks aren't paying attention to the disruptive nature and the speed at which it's going to come.
And I'll share another aha moment. And for me, it's more about unlocking my own greatness and my own potential. And in one of these meetings, I was there early and I was listening to the person who was presenting ahead of me. I had my granola app transcribing everything she said. And then that, in the click of a button, gives me just condensed, optimized notes. I took those notes, plugged them into Perplexity Deep Research, along with a copy of my presentation that I was about to give next after this 10-minute break. And I, gave it a lot more context than what I'm about to share here, but I basically said, take everything from the previous presentation, take everything from my current presentation, and tell me how I can make it better and make it more impactful for this audience, right? So that allows me to show up as the very best version of myself, which I know that's what everybody wants to do when we're showing up to work anyways. I tell people all the time, people don't work a job because they don't want to do good work. People want to do good work. This now lets me do my best work at lightning speed. And so if people can just kind of lean into it from that mindset and that perspective, I think it will kind of unlock that next level of usage for them.
I think also, just to piggyback on that, what that room saw was the from to, right? They watched someone present, and for a second, I was like, hey, I don't know if you want to show all of that because you're going to really make this other person look kind of bad. But she did it in a very thoughtful way, and she did a great job threading the needle, and that other person stayed in the room, took a lot of notes, wanted to talk afterwards, right? Because everyone wants to get better. It's just a lot of times folks don't understand how. But I think in that moment, she did two things. She provided a better presentation for us to deliver in our part of it, but she also showed to these folks what you can do and the power of AI. And their minds were blown. They literally were going for like 10 or 15 minutes and came back and they were like, you did what?
So can I jump in on that one too? I couldn't agree with both of you more. And I think to just double click on one thing. So one could argue that that's an operating system that you could install into any business of any size that has people in a position where the workflow you just described, if I abstracted that, I could kind of squint and say, hey, imagine a 100-person sales team who has, hundreds of conversations on a regular basis every week with the market. And imagine the notion of the sales team having those conversations, instant feedback going to the marketing team and the subset of marketing, which are demand gen and maybe lead gen. And that informs insights and ideas that inform the next best action around conversations like this, like in real time. And all of a sudden you become magnetic as a business because you're really harnessing the closeness that the AI can create between the market, human beings, empathy, strategic stuff, creative stuff. And I think all of that is where it's headed real quick, because everything I just said from a technical perspective is 110%, as you know, available and possible. And you could create that in a pretty modular way at scale, which watch out, in a good way.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because on your podcast, AI with Alec, you talk a lot about deploying AI at scale, and you have talked to a lot of business leaders who are transforming their industries. So give me one real world example that you've seen or that you've talked about that's just blown your mind that maybe the rest of the audience hasn't heard about yet.
So an ontology aware system, which a lot of fancy words in there. Your ontology is the stuff that we could just talk about as human beings right now and very easily understand, as could your listeners, regardless of technology quotient or whatever. So ontology is like business concepts and logic, like the 100 or so or 500 some odd concepts that describe how a business creates value. And it's easy for us to talk about this as human beings. It's very difficult to represent that in a database or a traditional, Excel spreadsheet or what have you. So if you take ontology and you move that into something called a knowledge graph. Knowledge graph is a way to take data sets and abstract away the relationships between them, and so that the machines can understand better the things that we as human beings understand naturally. So you're now stepping into a territory where if you stand up an enterprise AI-enabled knowledge graph that associates with all of your data sets that are no longer siloed in your business. So the stuff that's in your Salesforce, the stuff that's in your HubSpot, if you're a HubSpot person, the stuff that's in your Workday, you name it, stuff that's in your granola, you can now stand up and enable hundreds of thousands of lines of legacy code to be reduced to 10,000, 9,000, 7,000. And then you can enable the machines to alert the people, right, us, of insights that, again, were previously unimaginable. And everything I just described is absolutely out in the wild and happening. Big shout out to Relational AI and Blue Yonder. Blue Yonder is one of the leading supply chain and analytics companies, it's publicly traded. And with Relational AI and Snowflake's help, they have stood up, effectively an ontology-aware system that any of their clients can use to much more rapidly and intelligently react to supply chain disruption, which has been a topic of a lot of importance with tariffs over the last 3-4 months. So it's a long way of saying, I think if you just take a look at knowledge graph enabled systems that tie to AI in the enterprise, you can start to see things that are just unbelievable. And Blue Yonder, Snowflake, and relational AI is a perfect example.
Yeah, all of those organizations. I've been a Snowflake partner in the past, right? And I've been to some of their conferences and done some things and listened to them. I think last one I went to, they had a Jansen from NVIDIA. He was supposed to be there, but then he kind of dialed in, which is pretty cool to see. And I think when you talk about the knowledge graphs and you talk about, what's the word, ontology, right? One of the things when I was going through one of these AI leadership transformations at MIT, they were talking about the Polanyi paradox, right? We know more than we can actually say, right? Which is part of the problem as humans. We have so much, ingrained in us.
Quantum computer.
Right, exactly, effectively, right? And then so we're trying to replicate that in the real world. But one of the things I try to teach people all the time, kind of in a similar kind of thinking, is that if you're at an enterprise or a middle market, upper middle market to enterprise organization, if you're already on Microsoft, right, or if you're a Google Workspace company, for example, it makes a lot of sense for you to be dialed in there. Their distribution their unlock is massive because what they're able to do connecting to your G Drive and to your Gmail, all of these different sources, to your point, they can just pull from all the historical presentations, everything, right? That is a massive unlock that can't really be replicated if you're just using, say, Perplexity or ChatGPT as a standalone, right? As a solopreneur, or even if you're a small organization, or even if you're trying to use Claude, because of what they've already kind of tapped into is like, we already own your data across so many different applications. Why don't you just pull all that together and you're going to learn a lot more? And part of the reason why we target a lot of, I mentioned this before, but I target a lot of go-to-market folks. I partner with Erica from our chief people officer background to target HR folks, right? Because one, on the go-to-market side, they tend to be a lot more curious and bullish on how can I be better? Because it's a numbers game for them, speed and optionality, right? It's scoreboard, right? And nothing puts points on the board like AI these days. It's part of our conversation. But on the HR front, the reason why I started leaning in there, going back to my kind of digital transformation days, it's like, all right, typically when we talk again about the how do you move people, again, I mentioned that this affects every single employee, right? Every single person. And I just want your take on this. I was like, hey, why are these CEOs so surprised that their organizations aren't moving towards it or running to AI? It's like, you've now created this business outcome goal. You've not created a story that actually has all of your people in it. And then you seem to be highly surprised that you got 90% of the org rowing against you. Because when you don't put them in a story arc, they assume that AI is replacing me, right? So when I'm telling folks now, it's like, look, stop just saying IT is going to do this or marketing is going to do this, right? Start making it personal. So are you seeing folks, and move from curious to actually training people? Stop using just be curious. So what's your take on that?
So Moderna merged the HR and IT functions into one. And I thought it was really—
So we're not crazy?
No, you're spot on, right? I mean, because think about it, if the average human in a company in the very near future is going to be, quote unquote, responsible for leading humans and leading machines, right? Agents and so on and so forth. In that context, how do you onboard and lead humans and do it the right way within the framework of the guidelines and the principles of the business? And going back to our previous conversation, the same with the agent side of the equation and what is or isn't appropriate for me to be sharing from our proprietary, and we can go on and get technical and go in the rabbit hole. But no, I think you're spot on because, there's always this saying of it's one thing when everyone walks into a conference room and has an all hands conversation and leaders are in there, saying this, that, and the other thing. It's an entirely different thing when all those leaders leave the room, door closes. And then what happens then? That's why psychological safety is a huge part of the leadership equation for AI, right? So if you give me, X units of bandwidth available to transform a business into an AI first business top to bottom, I'm not going to spend much time on the technology at all. I'm going to focus on leadership, psychological safety, hands in dirt training, workshops, and what have you. And then it takes care of itself once people feel pretty clear generally about where the puck is going, to the extent that you can only be so clear at this moment in time because things are changing so fast. But the tectonic plates underneath everything have started to stabilize. And I think we know that for the reasons we talked about off camera a bit with Sam Altman, looking at his hires in the last 3 big hires, tell you a lot about where things are headed, in terms of models, inference, businesses being built on top of a baseline assumption about how much intelligence we all have access to on demand now. So
Let's talk a little bit about that psychological safety, because that is paramount in any organization, but especially when it comes to adopting AI. And I would love to hear your perspectives on how do you create a heightened level of psychological safety in organizations so that people do lean into AI without fear.
I think the first step is you got to talk about all the things that essentially fall in the category of say the quiet part out loud, right? Yeah, the first thing generally that maybe someone thinks about is, hey, that's really impressive, but if that automates those easy tasks, does that mean that I am going to have a job in a couple of months if I introduce this into the equation? So I think you have to really start with being really practical about deconstructing workflows. Bundles of jobs are just, so a person's job is just a bundle of tasks. So if you take the tasks and unbundle them and then do the same with associated workflows, you could do process mining. Celonis is a great example of a company that does that at scale. But you basically, if you had an architecture on a wall, big whiteboard of various tasks, roles and responsibilities, workflows, and how the business creates value from there to there and everything in between. And collectively, you all looked at that with a beginner's mindset and a curiosity of like, hey, how much pain is associated with this tedious but important task versus this, which is superhuman? Then you just step into Pareto's principle, right? So if 20% of the effort drives 80% of the results, if you can put a couple clicks onto the 20% by taking it away from, so like if some folks have to do some things for 7% of their day to day, if you could take that 7% and just delegate that to the machines with confidence and then allow them to repurpose the 7% to the 20, do the math, right? I think there's like a 28% jump on the 80. So I think everyone gets excited about that. So I think it's really just being enormously transparent about the grid on the left and then doing the before, during, and after together. Stand-ups, right? Stand-ups are important so that people feel really close to what's happening day to day, and almost over communicating during the initial process as the plane takes off. And then within 100 days, you're going to have a culture that's going to feel real comfortable about the promise and power of this stuff versus stepping away.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're starting to reach that point, right? We started on this journey several months back, right? And you're starting to see like people aren't even saying anymore that they're using AI. They're just using AI, right? Just like I tell folks all the time, you don't walk into a room and say, today I'm going to use electricity. Watch me use this computer.
This is amazing. Check me out.
Right. It is a part of how things, actually work. And I love kind of how you laid it out. We call it the productivity crisis, right? We talk a lot about that. And so I try to make it very stark for folks to understand it, right? There's a lot of documented evidence that says that the average knowledge worker spends somewhere around 40 to 50% of their work week either searching for things to do their job, copy and pasting, or reformatting data. It's like, I don't know anyone that signed up for that job. I don't know anyone that was hiring knowing that that's what was going to happen. But that is the reality of where we are. So now you got this magic bullet that's going to create, to your point, whether it's 28% productivity, we typically say somewhere between 20 and 40%, depending on your roles and responsibilities of productivity. And it's all the way up to the CEO level, right? For me, I probably have gains of 60%. Like people are probably annoyed with me because I got a different idea every day now, right? And then I got to then ask my digital twin, and I have to ask my team around me who's like, hey, is this too much, right? Can we move from here to there? But I do think that the candor, the transparency, right? We try to say a lot of times, it's like, everybody says AI is not going to replace you. The person knows AI is going to replace you. The thing I also will say is that AI is here to replace some of these processes that are very repeatable and should have been automated in a different way a long time ago, right? The idea that I remember every like 5 or 10 years, someone's like, all right, we're going to modernize all these old PDFs and all these old documents. Like, I know the government's been talking about that. I worked on a project alongside of Publicis and others.
We did
16.
We did another presentation with a room filled with HR individuals. And afterwards, a couple of them came up to me and they were like, the fact that we can just standardize all these 8,000 job descriptions we have. I said, I know. How long has that been on our to-do list? Because it's on every HR professional's to-do list and we never get to it because there's always a dumpster fire somewhere. But I want to take you on another left turn. I'm the bus driver here, so I'm taking you everywhere. What is your favorite tool to use in your personal life?
I'm a big Claude guy. And the reason I think Claude is so great is I love to write. And if you write, which it really is just a manifestation of thinking, right? Claude, I think, is the best, hands down, in that regard. And so Claude is my go-to. I really enjoy Google Deep Research too, because the horsepower available there is a bit different. I know Claude's come out with their research, and I actually, it's on my to-do list. I was looking at it last night for some stuff. I'm gonna try it out. But yeah, I think Claude is by far. I mean, I Perplexity is my version of how I search the public web, which is cool too. But I find Claude's the thing that if they were like, hey, it's $500 a month, I'd be like, really? Okay. Like that kind. Whereas if they took some of the others away from me, I'm like, okay, like I'll just go to the whatever your competitor is.
Claude, the folks that love Claude always say, Claude gets me.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's like some kind of vibe to it. But
it's got a lot of intuition.
But the writing part, I see hands down, right? I know a lot of folks that are either they have newsletters or aspiring to write a book or I did like a kind of bake-off of a client recently, and I sent something that I used. I think it was ChatGPT I used, and then I also used Claude. And like the writing, it was just, I don't know, it was more thoughtful. It seemed more compelling, and it doesn't even know me like Chat does, right? But the thing I've been saying to folks a lot, and I'd love to get your take on this. I say from a foundational model, a large language model perspective, I said over the next couple of years, they're all kind of converging on this to be within 5% of each other, right? They're all racing towards AGI is kind of like the goal. And so I tell folks, I'm like, hey, I don't think, unless you're really deep into understanding the variance between the writing to the coding, Claude did a great job. Now ChatGPT launched their thing. Like they all keep going back and forth, right? I said, but if you don't really fundamentally know how or why, pick one or two. Let it start to know you. Let you start to better understand it. A lot of people, I used Perplexity a lot in the early days for search. Right. Then I started using more OpenAI. I got away from Claude because before they didn't have search. Now they have search. Right. And it would always come back. It's like, well, my data is only till October. I'm like, come on, man. Right. But then Google was a little bit behind. So I just think that, again, stick with one or two if you're a novice. Right. But what's your take on their convergence of coming closer together? Like, what do you think?
I think that for this audience in particular, I think you should just operate off the assumption that, exactly as you said, they're all, relatively speaking, equally as useful. They're all going to get better at a similar clip. So just move past that, right? So to your point, like pick one, especially for those that might see this as a little bit concerning and they're nervous and they haven't had that magical moment just yet, but just pick one. Pick a circle of competence of yours that you're deeply knowledgeable about, like, the thing that you do every day for work or whatever, and just use it as much as you can. Just keep pushing yourself to use it within the context of the workflow. But yeah, I think the other thing, not to get too, geeky on this, but there is a concept called RAG, which gets pretty interesting pretty quick. So imagine, I'll just, for the audience real quick, because I think this is one of those things that even if you're not technical, it's kind of fascinating. So imagine if you wanted to use a large language model and the thin wrapper over top of it, which is the chat interface, right? So meaning like, if you're using ChatGPT or whatever, if you use it today, it's more or less the sum. It understands all publicly available information. We'll just oversimplify it that way. Now, imagine around the corner, there's this bookstore, right? That has the best books that are all about the things that you love the most, and are so deeply connected to your circle of competence in your work. And so imagine if you could take that bookstore and every question you ask that LLM go forward, would be viewed through the lens of that bookstore and then back. That is where RAG starts to introduce some phenomenally interesting ways to start using the technology in a way that it becomes much more knowledgeable about your subject matter expertise and what greatness looks like within the context of that. So RAG is a big, big, big driver of where things are headed to fine tune the models. But the baseline models, just assume that they're all about as good as each other. Like, what's the difference between a really fast car, another fast car, another fast car? Like, they're all fast cars, right? Whichever one you prefer, you just pick the color, you know?
It's all about the driver at that point.
So at that point.
When you talk about RAG, so that's retrieval augmented generation, right? Like idea of going out and getting more information to either greater context or, to your point, make it more fine tuned to like, hey, I get that we're talking about this, but I only want it through the confines of, race cars, right? Or only want it through the thought process of a 10-year-old's set of books, right? But, and that's where you start to move into like agentic AI and start to really, seeing some of the amazing things, right? And that's part of the disconnect too, right? You have business leaders that are more focused on agentic AI at times, and they want RAG, they want the knowledge base, they want, hey, I want all of this. And what they have not slowed down is like, but could you help the person in HR draft these job descriptions faster? Do you know what unlock? Do you know how strategic those folks, right? So one question I have, and I don't know how much time we have, but I'm going to ask the question here is, I've been listening a lot over the last couple of years, and a lot of folks keep describing, today's day and age as a renaissance period, right? Where a lot more generalists are going to be needed. And I tell folks all the time, is if you sit at the intersection of any type of business function or business and technology, you're light years ahead if you could use this stuff. The siloed roles, the one-trick ponies, if you will, are going to be challenged, right? But do you see this as a time of, you see further silos, more generalists? Like, what's your take on it?
That's such a great question. Yeah, I think generally speaking, anyone today can become pretty good at something because they have access to the genius machine, right? So there's one step in that direction. Therefore, cross-functional capabilities and people that understand multiple disciplines. Historically, it's always been those that sit at the intersection of disciplines can kind of come up with a lot of innovative ideas and create a lot of value, et cetera. So that will just be accelerated and enhanced. Now, one thing that might be, maybe here's a little hot take, a little contrarian stuff, is that I think that those that are really good at something, right? I mean, like really good at something, are going to become extraordinary at that thing because the learning loops are so compressed and accelerated. And that same human, going back to the board, let's just use an artist, for example. So if an artist in the business setting can basically delegate everything except for the art to the machines and a combination of other human beings that are quite good at this, that thing, the artist is going to spend 110% of his or her time doing the art and getting better. And so I think part of the abundance is those same people are going to create extraordinary new businesses, extraordinary new ideas. And we're going to look back and think it's kind of laughable that we spent the 25 to 50% of our time pecking around in this, system of record and then going into this one and what's my password and all this horrible stuff. Is like, what are we doing here, right? We're going to have a much more intuitive, seamless interaction, and we're all going to have, little AI agents that are going to be, derivatives of ourselves, so that we can really just focus on the thing that makes us superhuman and super capable, so that the machines can do what they do best, and that's the humans plus machines, not humans versus machines. I wouldn't spend much time thinking too much about the automation side of things because that'll take care of itself. That's just like, hey, take care of the busy, hard work that's important, but I don't want to do it. Focus on the thing that really creates the value.
So one of the things we do here on this show to encourage people to really lean in
Is this why we do it?
Play a game called Last Chat. And what Last Chat is where you go to your Claude, since that is your thing, and you tell us, what is the last chat you had with your Claude? Could be anything in there. Now, we'll go
literally the last one?
Literally, we want to know, what is your last?
I mean, directionally.
Correct. Now, I will tell you while you dig it up, I used it while I was in Italy this past weekend. And when you go traveling and you want to have a very specific experience, but you don't know how to find it, right? In the old days, we'd go to Google and we would be searching and hopefully a review would come up. Well, I wanted this very particular experience, I wanted to find an Italian restaurant that was in an Italian name that did not have an Italian/English menu, because you might not get Italians cooking your food even when in Rome. And I wanted it to just be this certain vibe. So I went to my ChatGPT and I said, I'm a tourist. I'm in Rome. This is where I am located. And I gave it some cross streets. And I said, I want to find an authentic Italian restaurant that does not have an English version of their menu, that's been around, family owned, like that whole vibe, right? And in seconds, it gave me this restaurant. So my husband and I are like, let's go check it out. And we walked in and it was one of those super cute, like totally old bricks. Some of them are crumbling, old newspaper articles printed up on the walls of what famous celebrity had been there, Mariah Carey, apparently. And the food was phenomenal. People spoke some English, but it really didn't matter because anything I ordered on the menu was amazing, authentic Italian food. So I got my wish. I got my curated experience, all thanks to ChatGPT.
So you don't think that if you'd have just put pizza shop near me in Google,
God,
that you would have gotten the same experience?
I would have found every tourist joint, because it's us Americans that go in and leave all these reviews on best Italian pizza I found,
But see, I bring that point up and I make fun because what you talked about this, well, I tell people all the time, I say, I don't AI search, I AI research, right? Like I'm doing way deeper than, like to your point. And, it used to be, I guess, back maybe like 6-7 months ago, they said like the average Google search was 4 words. The average Perplexity search was like 25 to 30 words, right? And you can see the power and the difference in that type. And I always use that. And I always tell folks, I said last May, Google turned the lights off when it went sponsor links AI overview. And I've been asking people for 9 months. I kept saying, what do you think is going to happen, right, to your companies? And the reason why I bring this up is the whole reason why I came up with the name of the show, Voice of Victim. It's not just an individual level. I do fundamentally believe now people are waking up to smaller organizations in particular will end up being victims, right? Especially the ones that aren't running towards AI or running towards the technology, right? And I told the team here, I was like, I'm not trying to jack you around. I just understand that there's going to be some bodies left. There are going to be some companies that, man, maybe I should have, right? Because they didn't understand how fast this was moving.
He said, let the bodies hit the floor.
I mean, we are trying our best with this podcast, with our conversation with folks to tell people like, you have to do this. And it's so weird for me because I've talked to marketers, I've talked to IT professionals, HR. One of the weirdest things, and I'm gonna get back to my chat here in a second, which is I ask a question all the time. It's like, by show of hands, how many people we say AI anxious, curious, or serious? I trademarked AI serious, literally trademarked it. Like she calls herself curious, but now she's somewhere in between curious and serious, the way she's using it. And the marketers, which I thought they have the innate qualities to be more curious, were not as curious. The IT folks were still kind of wavering. The HR folks were like 80% all in, like, let's go.
That's because we're the ones.
You got a lot of mundane tasks.
Well, here's the deal. HR is truly the junk drawer of the organization, right? If it does not fit into a description, it goes to HR. And so we have all of these tasks that just aren't in our wheelhouse. They're not in our expertise, but they impact the people somehow. So it goes to HR. So to your point, hell yeah.
But now you get to be more strategic leaders. What I kept saying, I was like, you guys understand how these businesses work. And not to mention, you're in charge of upskilling. Like, you were talking about not being victims. Why people aren't putting HR at the seat of the table is ridiculous to me. So now I'm going to get into
What's your last chat?
My last chat was a 2-part. Like, one, I almost only do deep research. So it's sometimes I have to forget that I'm like, oh, I just wanted something fast. I didn't want to. But I said, where do most people believe Gen AI is on the hype cycle? So, and I wanted to do a deep research. I'm like, all right, I keep hearing people, and people will give anecdotes or people give their feeling of something. I said, but generally speaking, where do people believe they're on this hype cycle? And then I was like, I wanted to refine it because what I've seen is that I talk a lot about the haves and the have-nots. I think that enterprise, when I talk to folks all the time, historically I've worked with nothing but enterprise companies. Now I'm trying to go downstream a lot more. Because I always say, I'm like, Nike gonna be all right. Google's gonna be all right. I'm worried about the HVAC company over there or my accountant's little firm, what's gonna happen with them. And so I said, okay, well, what about smaller companies in middle market? Are they at the same stage in the hype cycle or their view of the hype cycle? And it was like, no, large enterprises are entering, truffle disillusionment, blah, 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 So there's a lot of other things, but again, I'm AI researching. I'm trying to understand and learn a lot more. And I'll pivot to you in just a second. One last thing I say to folks, we're in a room, someone says about not being smarter because you're using these tools. And the anecdote I use, I said, I was the poor kid in high school that was taking AP calculus and physics that couldn't afford the graphing calculator, right? I don't think that made me smarter. It made me choose. I was either going to learn math and physics or I was going to learn history. I was not going to learn both, right? Now I can learn all these things, right? And I think that's the unlock. You have to view it differently. And so anyway, it's a long way to say I use
Alec?
deep research.
I like that.
What's your last chat?
It's Nerdville.
Let's go.
Let's hear it. We love a nerd.
So I have 92,000 plus words across 85 different unique pieces of content on AI with Alec. It's just a curated, kind of what have you to help, people help themselves, whatever, learn this stuff. And one of the things that I'm trying to work through is establishing a semantic layer over top of it to enable semantic search. And so I was talking with Claude about that. And for those, I know you all know what that means, but it enables people to search and get results based on what they mean versus what they say, right? Keyword search is ridiculous, especially in this space. It's moving so fast. How in the world is somebody who's in the beginning of their journey, curious, supposed to know the difference between rag, graph, rag, and it's like whiz bang, so I'm trying to help people in that regard, when they go to my site, aiwithalec.com, to stand up a semantic search querying so they can interrogate the data themselves as opposed to having to click through everything. And so I was working with Claude over the weekend on that as I'm coding it out myself, which is hard and helps me learn faster.
I love that because I quite frequently tell my own children, know what I mean, not what I say. So there you go. But
So
Alec,
the sentiment analysis.
my sentiment, right? But thank you so much for joining us on the
Thank
podcast. I think today was extremely insightful. We've got a lot of things, I think, to think about.
So you don't want me to talk for another half hour with Alex? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, you can, but we gon' cut.
All right. Because I got a lot more. We can talk off camera, but I really appreciate the conversation.
Likewise, thank you so much. Love what y'all are doing.
Thanks for joining us on AI, Voice or Victim. If you want to stay competitive in the AI age, start now. Take one insight from today's episode and put it into practice in the next 24 hours. Make sure to follow us, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more actionable AI insights. See you next time.